Hello, bonjour. Good afternoon from Toronto, and welcome to Tea with Me, my interview series, conversations over Zoom with interesting creative people from around the world. I started this in COVID lockdowns, and then, well, life got in the way. But I'm still here. I have short hair, but I'm still here, and I'm ready to rev up the Zoom call conversations. Today is long overdue. Update to the series is a chat with an internet friend you may know off Instagram as Coffin Goblin. Danny is her name, is a young Trad Goth from England, and we first met over the internet for my global remake of 40 Years of Goth Style. She agreed to be in my video and nailed it as our Trad Goth. We've been talking about talking ever since, and finally, we had a chance. So please enjoy this conversation about the scene in England and what it's like to be a trad goth in 2023. Welcome, Danny, to my YouTube channel. It's great that we can finally do this.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we met over the internet for the global goth style video project. You were our trad goth from England, and we talked about doing this back then, but life intervened, and I've been away from the channel, which has informed the mug I chose for this conversation. My first tea with me since I went through cancer treatment. So I've chosen the fuck death mug to hold my very strong cup of British Builder's tea. So before we start talking, I'd like to know what you're drinking.
I'm drinking a hot chocolate out of a Count Pugula mug with a vampire pug on it that I got in TK Maxx a few Halloweens ago.
Brilliant. I love it. So the first thing I want to ask you is the same thing I ask a lot of people when I meet them in person or when I interview them was how you got into goth culture. How did you first discover this music or this style, and where were you in your life? What attracted you to it? Kind of tell me your origin story.
Yeah, so basically, my dad was a new romantic in the 80s, and he raised me. So he raised me on his music. So basically, I just grew up listening to his music, and by proxy, I ended up liking that music, and it just evolved from that. So I started dressing more the way I wanted when I became a teenager. It was more emo at that time since that was the more popular alternative style back then. But then obviously I still listened to the usual goth music on the side. So it was basically like listening to goth music, also listening to emo music, but dressing more emo. But then I started dressing more goth once I graduated high school, which was back in 2017, when I feel like I grew out of the emo phase that I had. And I just embraced the actual goth side more, um, which I've really enjoyed. And I truly feel this is the way I am meant to be. And I feel like I've always just had like an inclination towards the macabre, so to say, because ever since I was 10 or 11, I've wanted to study forensic science. And I've been passionate about like crime books and true crime podcasts and all that. And that's what I'm actually studying right now is forensic science, which I'm actually graduating from at university in a few months. So that's exciting.
It is exciting, and I definitely want to come back to that when we talk about graveyards, but I can't let it pass that you talked about emo as a gateway or as a trend, because as you may or may not know, I've gotten a lot of shit from viewers of my channel for including emo in some of my videos and also talking about it as being part of this history of this style. So, um, do you see a connection or do you see those as separate things?
I feel like there definitely is a connection. Not in the music, so to say, but just in the fact that they are alternative lifestyles, both of them, um, and therefore both styles are outcast from the main majority of society. So we do unite in that way, and I feel like there are some. Hmm, I wouldn't say there's overlap in the music, but there is definitely like a progression from listening to emo music when you're more of a melancholic teenager to then progressing to more gloomy goth music, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense to me, but I think we should move on before both of us get slammed with angry
Yeah.
comments. Um, so you're kind of a second generation to alternative subculture, and which is very different from my experience. I'm older, I came from a small town, and there were no weirdos in my family at all, which makes me wonder, were you immediately embraced in terms of this interest, or did you have the experience that I had and many people have where your parents, like, has anyone ever told you you can't go out looking like that?
No. My parents have always been very open and very accepting with both me and my brother, and they let us dress and express ourselves the way we wanted. So ever since I was allowed to, I have been dyeing my hair all sorts of colors. I've been doing any type of makeup I wanted. I've been dressing the way I wanted. The only thing was we had to follow the school dress code, but other than that, we had full on freedom with whatever we wanted to express ourselves with.
What's the student dress code and how do you manage it?
So it was mainly about makeup and stuff. So we had to still like not wear too much makeup. But other than that, like it wasn't that big of a deal. Like I just wore t-shirt, like band t-shirts and ripped jeans and hoodies back in my emo phase, and then witch hats and all that kind of stuff when I became more spooky goth type. So yeah, I've always just dressed the way I wanted.
So you said that it really, once you started dressing this way, felt very comfortable to you, felt like who you were inside. What do you think that dressing goth gives you in your life that you can't get from anything else?
Um, for me, it definitely confidence is one of the big things because just dressing down, it doesn't feel like me. I feel like I'm just pretending to be someone else if I'm dressing up another way. Um, but when I get on with my full goth makeup, full hair, full on like clothes and accessories, and I go out, I feel like that's who I am. I don't care what anyone else says. I I know I look good to myself, and I love the way it makes me feel. So I don't really care what anyone else thinks because I'm not hurting anyone else by doing this. Um, but other than that, in general, goth gives me, well, the understanding from the community because I feel like I'm not alone in that way, and just the way we unite with the music we love, with the passion we have for some movies and bands and concerts and goth nights. Those are just so wonderful. And I just love the community and the acceptance we all have for each other. So, yeah.
I totally appreciate what you're saying and definitely want to talk to you about the goth community and the goth scene where you live, because, of course, England has always been a source of great fascination for me. But I did want to offer that I share this idea of the aesthetic being my preferred aesthetic. Like people will say, well, if you're gonna dress like that, you have to expect people to stare at you, or are you trying to shock people? And maybe when
Yeah.
I was 16, wearing a lot of upside down crosses, I was trying to shock people, but I genuinely believe that this aesthetic is beautiful and
Yeah.
interesting. And I'm just like trying to live my life, my home, the way I dress, the people I hang out with, in a way that makes life more aesthetically pleasing to me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like us, we tend to accept and embrace the darker side of life in a way that doesn't isn't done by the rest of society. We tend like the rest of society just tends to avoid speaking about the darker side of life, death, anything like that. But we just seem to embrace it in a way that makes us appreciate life in a different way as well.
Let's switch and talk about the scene where you are. We almost met. We almost met a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago when I went to Whitby Goth because you're not far from there, but you were unable to go this year. So, tell me about where you live and what the scene is like where you are.
So currently I live in Nottingham, which is in the Eastern Midlands of the United Kingdom. And the goth scene here is quite good, I think. We have monthly goth nights, which I'm very grateful for because it's always good to be in a club type environment where people are dancing and appreciating the music I dance and sing to at home, and seeing that other people appreciate it as much as I do is just very heartwarming in a way. um, so that's very nice to see. And as well, I think because Nottingham is a student city, there's a lot more acceptance when it comes to alternative styles. So there's a lot of alternative people here, not necessarily goth, but there's a lot of emos, punks, metalheads, e-girls as they call them now. Um, yeah, so you see a lot of those, and of course you see some goths as well, which is very nice to see because I feel like I'm not as alone in a way. Because I grew up in a place where it wasn't as accepted, so I've been able to embrace it a lot more now that I've been living here because I don't feel as scared to go out, in fear of getting harassed.
Mm.
Um, Here it doesn't happen as often, because it's more common to see. So I don't think people are as shocked in a way. Um, but yeah, that's very nice. And as well, I think because there's a big drag scene around here, we unite with them as well, when it comes to nights out or club nights, that kind of stuff, because both of us are outcast communities. And there's also some overlap in the goth community and LGBTQ community, which makes us accept each other easier and just brings us both together. And I find that really lovely as well.
I agree, and that's interesting to hear because I was talking to people at Whitby. I met a trans man there, a young man who was like 25, and he does drag, and he was talking about that as well, this connection. And it's not something I've thought about here. Maybe I should think about it more, or ask my friends who are into drag culture. I don't think that we have the spooky drag that maybe you guys have over there.
Mm.
So that was an interesting thing to learn for sure. I feel like I got some pushback to my enthusiasm about Whitby and maybe even my article because maybe its time has come and gone as a goth festival. There were a lot of cosplayers there. Um, not as much music as some other festivals. Um, do you have the same um, ongoing debates in England about what is goth and who is goth and are you listening to enough goth music? Like, do those things still exist in the real world, or are they just on the internet?
Um, I do definitely think there are still some issues with people calling themselves goth just because they dress in black,
Yeah.
um, which is frustrating in a way. Like, I don't want to come off as a gatekeeper, but sometimes I just have to because it's just something that I have fully embraced, and it has taken so much out of me to embrace the full identity to then see people just claiming it without acknowledging the whole aspect of being goth. It just feels like something is being taken away from us, which it is not necessarily happening, but it it's frustrating in a way, to see more people misunderstanding us that way as well, because goth is not just about dressing in black and walking around looking depressed. No, there's so much history and so much that goes into it, and that goes underappreciated by most people.
I'm looking at the posters behind you. I'm looking at your eye makeup. I'm getting Susie Sue vibes. Maybe it's just because she's in the news lately, but was she an icon or an inspiration for you?
Definitely, yeah. Susie is one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to the way I look. When it comes to hair and makeup, especially, um, her music has touched me a lot. Because it's not. I feel like Susie's music, especially, may sound like the lyrics are very touching, but the music just sounds so cheerful. In some songs, so I just really enjoy that because it just shows that goth isn't necessarily depressing as some people think. Um, and I just really like to embrace that because although I may look like this, I am a very cheerful person most of the time. So I'm glad it gets like reflected in the music as well.
Something I also notice about you and appreciate is what you call a trad goth or an 80s goth fashion style, which includes DIY, thrifting, and
Hmm.
so on. Again, when I was in Whitby, I love beautiful Victorian ball gowns. That's not something I could have afforded as a young person. And even now, it's not something that I would spend money on filling my closet with those things. So I'm still very much a secondhand shopper. Tell me about your fashion sense and why you dress the way you do.
Um, One of the main reasons is because it's cheap and easy. As you said, secondhand clothing, even though it may it may just be a plain t-shirt, I can still customize it the way I want. I've got fabric paint that you can buy easily on Amazon or hobby shops. Patches I can hand make. I can sew things. I can customize things with pins or other accessories such as necklaces, and it's just a lot easier and it makes the look more authentic as well when you buy clothing items, even though they may just be plain black, in shops that are straight from the 80s, and then do whatever customizations you want. It makes the look so much more authentic and more unique to you, by customizing it the way you want, because obviously other people can't buy that. Um, and I just really like customizing my own clothes. It's such a fun hobby, especially when you put some music or put a podcast in the background and then spend hours painting something or sewing and that kind of stuff. It's just very wholesome, I feel like, and you end up appreciating that item of clothing a lot more than something you would just buy directly from a shop.
Yeah, I love your style. I think you look great, and I
Thank
have
you.
I have a lot of personal reasons why I haven't been as active here on YouTube, but also as much as I appreciate them as a viewer, there's like a lot of just haul videos and like, here's my clothing collection or here's the newest thing. And this feeling that like you constantly have to have like new seasonal clothes from the right brands is kind of depressing to me because I don't think that that's very accessible, or even environmentally wise. I kind of I appreciate the Vivienne Westwood style of, like, buying fewer things that are quality, but also, like you said, making them your own. So, thank you
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you have a lot of followers on Instagram, and, I appreciate you even if you're not intentionally or consciously promoting, you are promoting another way of goth fashion. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about your career outside of Instagram, which you mentioned off the top is forensics. When we put together the global goth fashion video, you chose a graveyard for your scene. So tell me about your interest in that and what your plans are for the future.
So I generally like graveyards because I just find them very peaceful. It's quiet there. There's not many people around, so I can just walk around with my music in my headphones. And I like just looking at the gravestones, seeing what kind of people are buried in that cemetery, what lives they led, because gravestones end up telling quite a lot about the person who is buried there. And I do enjoy reading about that. And if I find a very interesting gravestone, I may go home and Google it, just to see if there's any information online on the person. Um, Not to sound creepy or anything, but yeah,
No,
I
I
just find the history of it fascinating.
I don't think that's creepy. I do that when I travel. I go to graveyards because I learn about the history of the place there.
Yeah, yeah, I do generally like history, and yeah, forensics just comes into it quite a lot because I do one of some of my favorite subjects in forensic science is forensic archaeology and anthropology, and then forensic biology, which are some of the things I want to do. So it's just an overlap in that way to both my passions, and I generally enjoy it a lot. So I am applying currently, as I am graduating from university in a couple months. I am applying for a master's degree in either forensic biology or forensic medical science to do forensic pathology, and so that would include autopsies and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I know not a lot of people could stomach that, but I feel like I just generally appreciate the quote unquote art of autopsies and mortuary sciences. Um, so I'm excited to get into that more, and graduate with a master's degree in that. Um, so yeah, those are my plans for now. Other than that, it'll just be travels and concerts and hopefully goth festivals as well in the future. So yeah.
And hopefully continued delighting us with your Instagram. I find your the things you share to be very funny. So
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
before I let you go, is there anything that you would want people to know about what it's like to be a young person in the goth community in England in 2023?
um, just that know that you are strong and embrace the way you look and want to look, because it takes a lot of courage to go out looking this way, because there's always a risk of being harassed, but us still going out looking the way we want, no matter what other people may think, I just find it very very heartwarming that people do it, um because it does take a lot to deal with that kind of things. And just that the fact that a type of music brings us so close together, I just love that. And the more people see that we are not scary, the more people will appreciate our presence as well in the community. And yeah, I just really appreciate that.
Well, cheers to that and to you. Thank you for joining me here, and I hope that we meet in person someday, maybe at a Susie concert if we're lucky.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Yes.